in charge and Senior Vice President for FJC Security Service, Matthew Horace. You can help us on both fronts. One, the forensic part of the investigation and what it tells us, and also these bigger issues because you've dealt with them from a policy standpoint and the realities on the ground. When you hear about the wigs, when you hear about the extra ammo, when you hear about the different items in the car, to you, does it suggest a plan or just more of the randomness of the madness of this man?
No, it absolutely suggests that he may have had a broader plan. It was a cold and calculated and planned attack, and there may be certain elements of this crime that we may never know at this point because the suspect is deceased.
And how do you then rationalize how he went from having a plan to killing himself? Circumstances?
Well, it could be circumstances, but let's face it. When he committed the crime, he didn't disguise himself. There were CCTV cameras at the site. They developed a suspect very quickly, although he has wigs in his car. So when was he going to disguise himself? As a result of the escape or as a result of the crime? We will never know at this point. But there are certain elements that point to mental illness here, and there are certain elements that just point to a cold and callous crime.
Well, and also, why would he have all that extra ammo and not have it on him at the time of the murder? He had it in the car, so it's there. But also, we're not dealing with the most stable train of thought from somebody otherwise, so it's difficult to analyze it in a stable frame of mind. Now, that takes us to the bigger issues that you're pointing to. Let's talk about, everyone's starting to suggest mental illness. We don't know about any diagnosis. We don't know about any treatment. We don't know about any medicine. We don't know about anything from the family other than their condolences. What do you think?
Well, here we are 2 weeks after the last one, and we're pointing to mental illness again because of his behaviors leaving the studio. He left across threatening. He threatened employees. He went out in a rage. So we're assuming that he had some sort of mental illness.
Why? You can be angry. Put up part of his suicide note. Originally it was called a manifesto, but it doesn't really state anything of any purpose. So really it's just ramblings and a suicide note. I was influenced by Cho. That's my boy right there. He got near double the amount of Eric Harris. All right, there's one point. He's talking about the serial killers. You don't have to be mentally ill to be bad-minded. Also, he talks about racism a lot. Right. So is this a mentally ill person, or is this just a mean, self-loathing, vicious, racist person?
Well, some of the things that happened preceding the crime might point towards some avenue of mental illness. But the crime itself was cold and calculated. There was a plan. When you look at the things on the search warrant return, he actually planned it out. And then he has extra magazines indicating he may have wanted to do some more carnage. But then he commits suicide. So it's all over the place.
Right. But not following through, not being thoughtful doesn't mean that you're ill. If he went on trial for this, if he'd been captured, do you think he would have had a shot as an insanity defense?
I highly doubt it.
Right?
Highly doubt it.
And the racism isn't being talked about as much. He believed, probably wrongly, by all indications of fact, that he was a victim of racial things. Now the new reporting about what he thought this lovely young reporter was saying that was racist were probably things he was grabbing out of context. That when she would say going out into the field, which is something we say all the time, he took it as some type of, primal reference. So he was off. But you can be off and not be sick. And he talked about race as much as he talked about anything else as a motivation for his actions.
Which brings us back to your broader issue. In trying to determine who should have guns and who shouldn't have guns and who can purchase guns legally, there is that question on the form about being adjudicated mentally defective. In this case, he was not adjudicated mentally defective. Several of the other suspects in other mass shootings have not been adjudicated mentally defective. So at some point, we have to start looking at the form, the laws, coordination of the laws, and what we're doing here.
Look, you dealt with weapons in the field all the time. You know that there is such a robust black market for guns, a secondary market. There is so much sharing among gun owners that doesn't deal with or that makes an end run around registration. Do you believe that there is the tolerance, the ability within government, or the wherewithal to make laws tighter than they are right now, despite all the heartbreak and the pain of parents that is real?
I don't know if there's tolerance, but listen, this is the United States of America, and anything can be done if we put our minds to it. So there's that intersection between mental illness and how we treat mental illness. There's that intersect between who should have a gun, who can purchase a gun, and there's that idea of strengthening state and federal gun laws to ensure that these incidents just don't keep happening over and over again.
I hear you, and everybody's sick of it. And I know that statistically it winds up that these shootings, these types of mass shootings, are statistically irrelevant. They're like 1% of all shootings overall, but it doesn't matter. We don't like them because they speak to issues that we should be doing better on. And yet the question is, how? In Canada, you want to buy a handgun, and you're married. They call the spouse, and they say, how's everything at home? Everything okay? They don't want to do that here.
No.
Who's they? That's what Allison's father is talking about.
Right.
Do you, your experience in the field, that we need to do more in terms of who gets guns?
We absolutely need to do more in terms of who gets guns.
Because people say there are hundreds of laws on the books. Why don't you just enforce what's there? That's all we need to do. Do you think it's as simple as that?
No, it's not as simple as that. And certainly in my years at the ATF, our answer was we enforce the laws that Congress enacts. But let's face it, here in Virginia, one of the most gun-friendly states in the country, the laws are different in Virginia. You can buy high-capacity magazines. You can lay away a gun and pay down on the gun over time. You can't do that in New Jersey and New York. So I think there needs to be a coordination between state and federal legislative changes, sweeping legislative gun control at different levels, not to really strengthen the laws so much as to impede people's ability to purchase firearms, but certainly, time after time, we have to wake up. This is happening all too often.
There's no law in the books that would have kept this man from buying these weapons.
Absolutely not.
There's no law on the books currently that would in any way mandate that he get evaluated, held over, whether you look at the Baker Act or anything else, or any kind of treatment for what people may have even thought was mental illness.
Right.
So what do those two conditions tell us? Obviously, there's more that could be done. Or is there? Because that goes to the will. Matthew, Horace, thank you for the perspective on the evidence and what these bigger issues, how they play out in reality.
Thank
Allison.
you.